Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today as we unpack the economics of the enterprise marketplace model. I'm Fariha, the Research and Editorial Director and Senior Analyst of Marketplaces at Digital Commerce 360. I am so thrilled to moderate this panel today because our speakers include two experts that I've known for a long time, and I can tell you they know more about marketplaces than anyone I've ever spoken with. The panelists are Tom McFadyen, President and CEO of McFadyen Digital, and Adrian Nussenbaum, co-founder and US CEO of Miracle. We'll be discussing how the marketplace model can accelerate your e-commerce business. But before we dive into the panel, we each challenged ourselves to create one slide that we would take on a desert island with our favorite marketplace stats. So here's mine. The top 100 B2C online marketplaces in the world grew GMV 29% last year by our estimates. And when you remove the big giant marketplaces, growth is even higher. The sites ranked 51 to 100 grew double at 63%. So that shows that mid-sized marketplaces are gaining steam. Additionally, we just got results of our annual consumer survey, and these two stats stuck out to me. 46% of consumers shopped on a marketplace outside of Amazon, eBay, and Walmart last year, and 23% tried a new marketplace. This shows me that there's room at the table for other marketplaces and for others to grow. Lastly, I just want to highlight some of the reasons consumers gravitate toward marketplaces from our survey. This is in their own words. The top reasons are consumers like the broader assortment and products and more inventory, lower prices, and better fulfillment options. All right, enough from me. Adrian, it's your turn.
Thanks, Farah. Hey, everyone. Very nice to be connected to all of you. And thinking about desert islands makes me very vacation feeling. So this slide is a combination of a few stories. The first one is we look at the growth of miracle-powered marketplaces. And when we think of miracle-powered marketplaces, we think mostly of marketplaces launched by, in this situation, in that panel, traditional retailers. So companies who started with a completely different business model and felt the urgency to transform themselves, to reinvent themselves. And what's interesting is that we've looked at their growth and compared it to their direct e-commerce growth. And we've seen that their marketplace has grown by 81%, which is higher, if you think of a fair slide, to the average marketplace, which shows that when businesses are not afraid of change, embrace innovation, and do it in a way that is respectful of their brand, their DNA, their customers, they can actually have great results. So this was, the first element. The second one, which it's a way to remind everyone that the principles of a marketplace are very simple. It's all about giving more choice, more selection, more services, better prices to your customers. And it fundamentally starts by extending your product catalog. Even in a very curated way, you can always be the one-stop shop of what you want to be, and talk to your customers who expect sometimes more and different from you. And this turns out where you see that on average, those same customers who grew by 81% grew their product catalog by 32%. So it's a very simple recipe. You partner with more sellers and you grow your size of your catalog, and automatically your traffic on your site increases also. And finally, one thing which is nice is to see that a marketplace is not an isolated strategy. You can't grow a marketplace if you don't also think about the sellers that you're going to attract on your marketplace, and thinking of ways to provide them with the right experience, the right economics, the right support is key to have happy sellers and growing sellers. And when you do have that, and I will leave it to Tom to go into more of the details, but you can see that across the marketplaces, the more than 60 marketplaces which were used for this enterprise marketplace index, every additional seller brought in more than $100,000 of incremental sales, and those sales resulted in more than $14,000 of net profit. So that is kind of a segue to you, Tom, to start talking about why marketplaces are so much more profitable than direct 1P e-commerce.
Thank you, Adrian. So my recommendation is, if you're stuck on a desert island, is to buy this 450-page book, because it's a great cure for insomnia. It'll help you while away the days there on the island, passing out from the boredom from reading the economics and the technology and the other aspects of marketplaces. But to simplify the economics of marketplaces into some, again, oversimplified equations, retail and e-commerce has always been buy low, sell high. So the operator sets a price, ideally as high as possible, and their cost, P, is as low as possible from the suppliers, and their margin is M. So P minus C, buy low, sell high. Alternately, on marketplaces, the fundamentals are a bit different. So the third-party sellers set the price, and the marketplace purpose is to enable the sellers to sell to your customers. And the marketplace operator sets a commission fee of 10, 15, 20%. It varies. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And you collect a margin, which is that percentage of what the third-party seller sold for. So essentially, you help others sell and take a slice of that pie. This drives much more margin. And to get into a slightly bigger equation, again, oversimplified here, but there are a variety of different revenue sources on the top and expenses at the bottom. So the fees that I simplify here are commissions, again, 10, 15, 20% on a transaction fee. You can also have subscription fees for sellers to become members and sell on the marketplace. You can have a listing fee like eBay does. There are actually probably a dozen different types of categories of fees that can be charged. You see a lot of marketplaces being very successful with ads, advertising, especially in grocery, where CPG companies will pay to advertise on the marketplace. This could be featured product, search headline, display ad, and there are a lot of other ways in which marketplace operators can generate revenue, from fulfillment services, a lot of the data that's collected, selling that data or using that data to optimize 1P first-party commerce sales or in-store brick and mortar operations. And then, of course, at the bottom, you have the expenses, both CapEx and OpEx. The only slight difference there from traditional e-commerce is marketing, where you do also have to market to sellers to recruit sellers onto your marketplace. But otherwise, a lot of the pipeline expenses of operating a first-party e-commerce site disappear because you outsource a lot of those activities to third-party sellers. So your costs go down and revenues go up, which is, of course, the idea of improving your ROI with a marketplace. Back to you, Freya.
Awesome. Those are some very informative slides. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive into some questions that I have. The first one is, all of us in the e-commerce industry and commerce in general haven't been able to avoid the headlines about transformative, how transformative the last 18 months have been in the space. So how much of that is actually permanent, and how much of it was just happened in the last 18 months and now we're going back to normal? Adrian, maybe you can kick that one off.
So sorry, I was on mute. The classic Zoom or GoToWebinar. Obviously, everyone has been talking about the acceleration, the pandemic impact, but for us, what we've seen with our customers is that there is no return to the previous situation, and this has been said many times, so we're not here to just repeat it. This is not a blip. And fundamentally, when you think of why this is not a blip, the way we like to frame it is that the situation we've been through over the last year and a half has been a revelator, even stronger revelator of the what we call the three squeezes. So the three squeezes are demand squeeze, margin squeeze, and competition squeeze. And those squeezes apply to any retailer today. The demand squeeze is a simple one. Buyers want more. They want greater choice. They want lower prices, they want faster delivery, they want higher quality, socially conscious practices, but fundamentally, they want more. And more to a level that the traditional way retail has been organized cannot fulfill without a marketplace. The second squeeze is the margin squeeze, carrying costs, which continue to rise, demand for higher margins and greater operational efficiency. And so really, you need to be able, as a retailer, to respond to that without compromising on end user experience. And that's, once again, it's difficult to do if you're just trying to do it on your own. And the third squeeze is the competition squeeze, whereby any retailer today, if you think of what their competitive landscape was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, so many things have changed. It's not anymore a store-dominated world. It's digital giants who are investing heavily into new categories, new entrants who are going direct to consumers. Even manufacturers and brands are going direct to consumers themselves, creating some kind of channel conflict. So the slice of the pie is basically shrinking for traditional retail businesses. So for all these reasons, when you think of demand squeeze, margin squeeze, competition squeeze, you can see that marketplaces are bringing a solution to all these elements. It doesn't solve everything, but I can tell you that without a marketplace, businesses won't be around in 5, 10, or 15 years.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I just thought about, I think the first time I interviewed you or talked to you was in like 2016, and it was a very similar conversation. So this isn't coming up because of the last 18 months. It's been going around. I know both of you have been covering the space for over a decade. So it's definitely not a blip. And the kind of what we've seen is that if anything, it just accelerated it. Now consumers know they can get things fast and they can search for it online, and there's a lot of different places they can purchase it. So it's kind of like retailers need to step up permanently now. Tom, did you have anything to add to that?
It's once transformation happens for the better, it's hard to untransform. So it's likely they're going to stick. I just did 2 LinkedIn posts about the top 10 of the top 10 largest global retailers operate marketplaces, and 9 of the top US market retailers. So 9 of the top 10 US market retailers operate marketplaces. Everybody that's being successful at scale is operating a marketplace. So it's how likely is it that that's going to roll back? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the next question is for you, Tom. You've been building marketplaces for more than a decade. So how have marketplaces evolved over time?
Probably the awareness, popularity of them, and second, the ease of implementation. Those two different points. When we first started building them 10, 15 years ago, we didn't call them marketplaces and didn't realize they were marketplaces until probably 6, 7 years ago. They had all the fundamentals there of network effect, third-party sellers, commission structures on third-party sales. So all the fundamentals of marketplaces were there, but they were built at somewhat rudimentary levels, and the implementation time was 2 to 3 years, sometimes $5 million, $10 million to build out a custom build marketplace 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They were all very successful, never called marketplaces, but very innovative and next generation concepts. With the success of Amazon, a lot of people have become familiar with the concept of a marketplace and third-party sellers, and Walmart and other big giants operating marketplaces, so that the concept has become more popular and people are aware of it. So the second point I'd say is the ease of implementation. I don't want to make it sound trivial that it's a cakewalk to implement, but again, those used to be multi-million-dollar, multi-year efforts, and now with platforms like Miracle, you get out of the box that migration from first-party commerce to third-party marketplace and even beyond. I'll talk a little bit about that, the ability to launch feature-rich marketplaces based on the concept of the marketplace maturity model. You'll see that behind me, this graphic here, we have the marketplace maturity model. We have a white paper about that as well, but it describes essentially the evolution of First-party e-commerce started about 25 years ago with the introduction of SSL. Second stage is dropship, which is a rudimentary element. It still enables third parties, but the operator still has to do the merchandising, set the price, handle customer support. There's still a lot of load still on the operator in level 2 of the marketplace maturity model. Level 3 is kind of what we were building 10 years ago, but it's very rudimentary, the first tier of a marketplace. Level 4 is where you get into some of the enhanced features of platforms like Miracle, where you have sophisticated, automated, numeric, data-driven management of sellers, management of categories, management of products. As you start getting into hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of sellers and hundreds of thousands or millions of third-party SKUs and products, you need that capability in the quantitative management level 4. And then level 5, once you get into really optimizing marketplaces, perhaps you add on a services marketplace in addition to a product marketplace. Maybe you sell a ceiling fan as a product, third-party product, but you also enable a third-party service technician to go out and implement that, much like the gig economy workers and service economy, as an add-on to a physical goods marketplace, or a lot of other areas of optimizing level 5. So those capabilities are now out of the box with products like Miracle, and much easier to launch in timeframes of 4 to 6 months, as opposed to multiples of years to launch.
Yeah, I guess like it just makes it more accessible for big or small companies to adopt this model, whereas maybe before it was like, we need to convince our entire company and we need to invest millions and millions of dollars and years of time to it. So
and also, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting, I know it's not a webinar protocol, but at least it makes it spontaneous. One thing which is interesting is that the situation today is absolutely not the same that it was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Of course, in terms of like digital penetration and all that, but also simple adoption of marketplace. Like I see at Miracle, when we started this company 9 years ago, people asked me, so who are your customers? Well, no one. My mom really believes in the company, but I ask you to trust me, because I've done my own marketplace before. Now, when either Tom or myself, we present to customers and prospects, the first thing we do is say, okay, here's a list of 300 companies who've actually launched your marketplace. What industry are you in retail? Like Miracle has more than 300 clients. I was looking at 15% of them are in fashion and apparel. It means 45 retailers who sell clothes have decided to expand their catalog. And so change also needs that kind of like the feeling of I'm not going to be alone. There are other reference points. There are people who've done it well. There's also people who've not done it well, because let's not lie to each other. Marketplace is a change, and adopting change within companies and organizations can be difficult. So unfortunately, we've not seen 100% of projects that have been highly successful. And the reason is always the same. It's because the vision is not adopted internally. So you launch small with a small number of sellers, with a small team, and you just let it go like that. And you don't go beyond the internal, sometimes channel conflict. But I think it's important also to mention that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the next question that I have is for you, Adrian. We know the economics of the marketplace model are fundamentally different from the traditional model of doing business. Can you talk us through some of those differences and how it impacts the bottom line?
Yeah, and I will let Tom also go into more details, because they've really done a very interesting analysis. But fundamentally, it goes back to the fact that the end goal of a marketplace is the same. It's customer satisfaction. It's bringing to your customers what they want, when they want, where they want. It's trying to not build a business relying on 1% conversion rate, 2% conversion rate, which is basically 98 people walking in a store and say, I don't see what I want, bye-bye. I mean, this is literally what happens online. So it's about increasing conversion, having more to sell, but it's doing it in a completely different way. It's doing it where you don't have the constraints, the operational constraints, and the costs of doing that. You don't need to buy the merchandise that you sell. If you provide services, you don't need to hire the people that provide the services. You monetize your ability, because of the brand you've built, the partner relationships you've built, the traffic you have on your website, you monetize that by allowing other third parties to benefit from it in a curated way, in a controlled way with the right technology, so that it ultimately benefits your customers. So the economics are completely different, as Tom was pointing out. In one model, you buy merchandise and then you have a lot of costs. The cost of the merchandise, the cost of promotion, the cost of holding the inventory, the cost of shipping, the cost of having merchants team who work on pricing strategy and defining how many quantities all the costs that On the other end, your cost is basically payment costs and a bit of tech cost and a bit of dedicated teams that don't need to scale completely in a way that's completely linear to the growth of the sales that you generate. So you create the situation where marketplaces, and there was a Forrester research published a few years ago, which basically told that marketplaces were on average 2 to 3 times more profitable than direct commerce.
If I can add a point about the pipeline versus platform concept. Some of you may have read the book Platform Revolution, or understand the concepts of platform economics, including the network effect, the flywheel effect, the outsourcing of a lot of activity in quote inverted firm to third parties. So let me maybe explain that in how that affects marketplaces, third-party marketplaces versus first-party e-commerce. So the pipeline in first-party e-commerce is the retailer. This applies also to the B2B, but I'll talk about the retailer perspective right now. You have to source vendors, source products, negotiate contracts with them, select those products, bring them into your system, merchandise them, load them into your ERP, set up to determine the price that you want to sell them at, start doing SEO around that to optimize the merchandising, text, do photography, take the orders, fulfill the orders, and support the customer on that. In the platform economics, you outsource a majority of that, probably 75 to 80 to 90% of that work. Once you have third-party sellers and the ability for them to easily come onto your platform, they are doing the product sourcing, they are doing the merchandising, they're taking the photography, they're creating the text online, they are determining the price for it. They're at risk of, is this a profitable or not profitable price? They, in many cases, do the fulfillment. Sometimes they also handle customer support on the product. So all that activity gets outsourced to a third-party provider, and the marketplace operator simply enables the transaction, takes a percentage commission on the transaction itself. So you outsource a lot of activity, enables much more scale, enables much more profitability. And going back in history, I look at, I'm a fan of retail history, and there have been some big changes in history, from the first catalog with Montgomery Ward, the first department stores, the introduction of SSL 25 years ago that enabled e-commerce. And I think the best analogy of this is 100 years ago. Piggly Wiggly started the first customer self-service shopping. So prior to Piggly Wiggly, about 100 years ago, customers would go up to a counter and the retail store employees would ask what the customer wants. They'd go in the back of the store, find the good, they'd put it in a bag for the customer, then go back, get the next product, put it in a bag for the customer, and do all this. All this was labor that the retailer had to do with their first-party employees. Piggly Wiggly enabled customers to go through the shelves, pick up products, put them in their own cart, and go through the checkout line at the end. Essentially shifting that labor cost to the customer instead of to the retailer. Marketplaces do a very similar thing, except they shift that cost of all those activities in the pipeline of retail to the third-party seller. So essentially, you're reducing your costs, increasing your catalog, and increasing your margins with a marketplace business model.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a follow-up to what you said, a follow-up question, Tom, because I hear this from companies sometimes thinking about this strategy. So the benefit is that you can outsource a lot of the work that you would do in-house, but that could also be a struggle for some because you don't have as much control. So when you said you could outsource photography or product descriptions and prices, all of that, if you have a ton of sellers, how does the marketplace operator, the platform, have a quality assurance of all of that?
Well, I'll let Adrian chime in about some of the great benefits of Miracle out of the box to handle a lot of those capabilities. But certainly there's a lot of automation and curation. So the job becomes more one of curation instead of doing the actual activities. And there's a lot of automation that can happen. Miracle has some great tools for doing that at scale. Adrian, I'll hand it over to you to chime in on that.
No, thanks, Tom. And I'm starting to blush because you're really doing a lot of promotion for Miracle, but I appreciate it, and it reminds me of the days where I first met you at a trade show like 5 years ago, and I kept on running after you and told you, hey Tom, you gotta do Miracle implementation. It's the future. But so what I mean, I think to your question, Farah, the marketplace, as we've said, it's a very simple model. More sellers, more products, more GMV. As simple as that. But when you think of how the operations of a marketplace, more from a technical standpoint, it's actually much more complicated than e-commerce itself, which is why at Miracle, if you think of it, we've built a platform which only takes care of the marketplace processes. We don't have an e-commerce front end because there are tons of e-commerce solutions out there, and we want to be agnostic to the solutions that may be already used by our customers or that they may be thinking of getting. But also because we think that marketplace itself, when you think of it, it's not a one seller to one customer relationship. It's a many to one, and those many are completely independent to the core system. So when you think of the processes, you need to be able to have a platform that allows at scale to automate seller onboarding, guarantee that catalogs are integrated in a way that makes them completely consistent with the overall taxonomy. So you need to have deduplication, normalization, cleaning of those catalogs. Then you have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of sellers that may be updating their price, their inventory many times, even many times per minute we have in our hundreds of millions marketplaces that we power. So you need to make sure that this doesn't create jams and queues and incidents. Then you need to be able for those sellers to operate autonomously, because the whole point of the economics is that you don't want to hire 300 people suddenly to manage every seller one by one. So the platform needs to be the regulator, the organizer. We have a function called Miracle Quality Control that automates seller curation, that creates preventive suspension of sellers, that rates everything. So it goes on all the way to routing the orders. If you have a mixed basket with multiple orders, with multiple quantities of different products, these need to be distributed. You don't want to stop the entire order if only one of the seller cannot fulfill one of the items. Then, and it goes all the way to payment, because ultimately the sellers want to be paid. So they want to know how much commission has been taken. They want this information to be able to flow into their ERP if they're using one. So it's a very complex chain, and that's why there's a lot of homegrown marketplaces, even large ones in the US, that have not seen the success they could have had. And every time when you speak to them, it's the same thing: is we're stuck, we can't onboard more sellers, the catalog data is not good. There's some errors in inventory, so we get order cancellation and so forth. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but it's a very technical platform, basically.
Yeah, that helps. And we got a audience question that I think relates to what both of you just said. What do you think the future of marketplaces looks like from a product liability perspective? Will the responsibilities start to shift to the operators or stick with the sellers?
I think I'll take the first part, but Tom, feel free to chime in. I think it's an interesting question because from a regulation standpoint, we operate marketplaces across more than 40 countries in the world, and the regulations are very different in different countries. In some countries, there's terms and conditions which specify very clearly that the seller is ultimately responsible of what they sell and how they sell, and the marketplace itself is operating as as an intermediary in a way. And that's true. In most countries, that's true. That being said, ultimately, customers are in contact with the brand. So even if, if you go back to your customer and say, oh, I'm really sorry, but I'm not responsible, it doesn't happen, which is why what I was describing, whatever the legislation, the regulation is, making sure that as you scale your marketplace, you can have the ingredients of customer satisfaction, which is, as we said, quality of data, accuracy of price and inventory, being able simply to tell people where is your order. Most calls to the customer support of homegrown marketplaces and not professionally built is, where is my product? Well, you know what, I have no clue because I'm not the one sending it to you. Which is, by the way, one of the big issue with the dropship platforms and the dropship programs that have been running for many, many years. So whatever, I would say regulation is one thing, and we do, have very advanced partnerships with the payment companies, the tax management companies, because even in the States, for example, you have different regulations across different states. But ultimately, the focus should first and foremost be on how do you provide a marketplace that provides a good experience for the sellers, the buyers, and the team who runs it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll just add,
yeah.
that there are a number of different issues, and one of the first steps in launching a marketplace is defining terms and conditions that will apply to all sellers. That's also one of the things that eases scale, is you have one standard contract for all sellers as opposed to negotiating contracts with every single vendor in the traditional first-party e-commerce. So that those terms and conditions are very important to go through that, and we always recommend engaging attorneys that are familiar with the subject in the specific region in which it'll be operating. And it's not only the liability of product defects, but there also are counterfeit issues or minimum advertised prices, authorized resellers. But fortunately, there are tools for automating a lot of that quality control. Even negative word listings, where you can automate some of that. Do some checking with some automated tools for confirming some of this data. So at scale, there are ways of doing that. But it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think this is one of the issues that has been changing a lot over the last couple of years. One, because there's just new legislation and regulations, but also a few years ago, I think there were many customers on, let's just use Amazon as an example, that were just buying from Amazon. And now, because marketplaces is more is a model that customers understand more, there's just more complexities. In the past, it was, I'm buying from Amazon, I want Amazon's customer service, they should know where my product is. But now I think people kind of get it. So it's definitely an evolving issue for sure. Just diving into some, sorry, go ahead.
One other quick thought. Of course, ratings and reviews on products has been around for a long time, but marketplaces also enable ratings and reviews on the sellers. So ensuring that sellers get quality ratings and reviews, and automating suspension of underperforming sellers based on customer complaints or other issues, slow deliveries, unanswered questions. There are certainly ways of automating the management of seller quality control in addition to product quality control.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question we received about how you expect things to evolve in the future. What are some of the monetization opportunities you expect to evolve in terms of marketplaces in the future?
I'll chime in with one here, and Adrian, I'm sure, can add additional thoughts. Advertising is an area we see huge growth in. If you look at Amazon, last quarter, they reported $7 billion of advertising revenue. So that's, annualized $35 billion a year and growing. I think there's growing at 77% of advertising revenue. We've seen this with some of our grocery clients. And it's typical that the CPG brands, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Kraft, Unilever would spend money with grocers to advertise and promote their goods in store. The same thing happens on marketplaces. So the ability to promote goods in a variety of different ways, from sponsored listings, from improved search results, banner ads, all types of different advertising are huge opportunities. And I also mentioned the second chance of the second, another category of adding on services on top of products. So sell a product and also sell the services. And we've seen huge uptick in some of the services marketplaces or services platforms like Upwork, Uber, Airbnb. A lot of these are essentially marketplaces for services, transportation, for Fiverr, for TaskRabbit. These are services marketplaces, and those are growing extremely fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they are great learnings from our friends in China that starts with an A, and with an A, and our friends in Seattle that starts with an A and ends with an N. And one of them is that they've understood very early that to win in a digital omni-channel world, you can't win on your own, and you need to partner. And marketplace is a first and foremost understanding that if you try to grow your business in isolation, you can't succeed in the long term. And so what they've done is, first, we launch a marketplace. Then we create a community of sellers around it. Those sellers, we want them to be strong. We want them to be doing well. So we start adding services for those sellers. Tom was talking about advertising, but there's also fulfillment. There is financing, helping those sellers sell more, buy more inventory. So they are leveraging some of the assets that you've built, and you can monetize across others, which is the use case of AWS. Amazon has the best servers to have the fastest site in the world. The first thing they do is they create a service to monetize it across others. It's adopting a platform mindset. And this is really fundamental. So there's the marketplace itself is the beginning of a journey. And hopefully people who adopt it now will, have great opportunities to grow in the coming 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And the danger is that the contrary to now is never, and that can result in 52% of Fortune 500 companies have disappeared since 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, one other valuable asset that's collected in operating a marketplace is the exceptional additional amount of data. And again, using the company starting with an A, we know that they learn from the third-party sellers what products sell well. Maybe it makes sense to insource those products, if you will, and make them first-party, carried inventory if something's selling exceptionally well with high margins. Maybe even white label or private label that product as your own good, and vice versa. If you're an omni-channel retailer and you have slow-moving first-party goods that are maybe seasonal or not moving out of your distribution centers or showroom floors, send those to third-party sellers and let them sell those. Once you start collecting that data, there's a lot of optimization of the financial model of the business that can improve margins.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of data, we got a question in, who owns the first party and third party data on a marketplace business model?
So the data belongs to the marketplace operator. The seller basically knows the name of the customer and where to ship, and obviously how much they paid for the product.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And based on your both of your customers' experiences, what are the common denominators with the most successful marketplaces? So, I mean, I'll take that to start, but at Miracle, we've established the 10 commandments of a successful marketplace, but I'll just share 3, and which are probably the 3 principal main ones. The first one is that the marketplace should not be an isolated initiative, a proof of concept, a little thing we do on the side, we don't talk about it. It needs to be a company-wide embraced initiative
because the company needs to understand that everyone will win from it. Marketing will get more page views, more conversion. Merchandising, like Tom was saying, will learn more, will have more agility, more reactivity. Finance will get higher contribution. The VP of e-commerce will get more revenues. The CEO will get a better company. The shareholders will get more returns. So it's really a company-wide initiative. The second one is that a marketplace needs to be fully integrated to the main site experience. It needs to, don't start to do a little tab on the top that sends you to separate experience with a different basket. And so it needs to be a fully integrated experience, and it needs to also to be consistent with what you are. We once had a conversation with a DIY company, and they said, yeah, we're thinking of a marketplace to sell dog food. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe, your customers have probably dogs and you could sell dog food, but is it really how you're going to have an impact? Whereas, those big lumbers that you don't necessarily want to own, or those outdoor patio set that are very seasonal. I mean, isn't there better stuff that you could bring on your marketplace? So that's the second one. And the third one is, it's a very simple one. More sellers, more sellers, more sellers. And let the platform regulate that. Because the customers, two things, they don't care who sends the product. They want the product at the right time, at the right price. So the more sellers you have, the more you create this endless aisle that you can merchandise in the way you want. You don't need to create an eBay looking experience, but at least you have the base of supply.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to Adrian's first point, which I totally agree with, that you have to get it as a company-wide initiative with executive level sponsorship. This is important when we do a lot of our strategy engagements and advisory services around planning for a marketplace. The only marketplaces that we've seen that have failed have most typically been not integrated into the first party platform, or kept off in the little, the back corner as a, let's try to run this as a little test in a closet over here. The really successful ones, and there's I think a big example of a well-known retailer, multi-billion-dollar retailer, that tried it in the US as a separate solution, did not go well. Tried it in Canada as an integrated platform, re-energizing their entire business as a marketplace. Multi-billion-dollar, many billion-dollar retailer, and it's had huge success integrating it in. So there's two, side-by-side examples of the same company taking two different approaches, proved that it's very different success rates. One other thing that, again, going back to some history analogies, 10, 20 years ago, the big argument was, well, should online be separate from brick and mortar? And who gets credit for it? How does the organization get structured? We have an e-commerce site and we have a brick and mortar store. And sometimes they would compete and not have organizational alignment. It's the same thing with marketplaces and e-commerce. You have to have organizational alignment between the two efforts, and they are complementary. There is not, one's going to kill the other. It's going to be the future evolution and transformation of the entire business. So getting the two integrated well is very important.
So along that line, how can a business launch a marketplace without diluting their own brand and becoming a generalist?
We see a lot of niche marketplaces and the ability to dominate a specific market. So being a generalist is very challenging. If you're not Amazon or Walmart, it's hard to become a broad line, horizontal generalist selling everything to the market. It's best to become a destination for a certain service or product or functional area. So we have projects going on now for chemicals, for tobacco products, for data for AI engines, a lot of different unique niche categories that can be very successful, very dominant, and win that niche and still grow to be hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of GMV.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then what's the average commission that a marketplace can take on products from marketplace sellers?
It varies, but commissions are usually the reflection of two things. One, the underlying margin that the seller has on the product. So, you know, when you're selling low margin products like electronics, you usually have lower commissions, or at least it's best practice as a marketplace operator to try to have a commission structure which reflects an understanding of the dynamics of your sellers. So you can have commissions that range from 5 to 30% most of the time, with an average around 18-20%. And the second thing is it's a reflection of two things: your power as a brand, your attractiveness as a destination, and the quality of the service that you are going to provide to your sellers. The ability, you know, in Miracle, you have a full promotion management engine, which allows sellers to participate in your promotions and not be left out. There are a lot of, you know, you can do payments to your sellers faster in the right currency. There's a lot of things like that that will also help you anchor higher commissions at a higher level, which we see across our customers, where they, for a similar seller who sells on the Seattle-based company's marketplace, our customers are able to take more commissions, higher rates from the same sellers, because they treat them better and they give them a more personalized alternative channel.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the strategy is defining that commission grid, typically by category. You know, what is the percentage range, and you know, part of our typical advisory services includes doing that, and there are a lot of public reference points for that as well. So you can find out what Amazon and Walmart and other big marketplaces charge as commission rates by different categories, and you'll see some are higher, some are lower. You know, the pretty broad range, and it also can depend on not only what the market standards are, but what you want to incentivize. If you want to go deep in a certain category, you may charge less commission in a certain category because that's where you want to become the niche and dominant player, versus other things that are peripheral, less core to your business. You charge a higher margin, and yes, sellers can list products there, but it's not an area you really focusing on driving growth.
Mm-hmm. So when a business launches a marketplace, and maybe they were a traditional retailer before, they had their own e-commerce site and now they're expanding, do you advise them to let their customers know, or like, I guess, how does that transparency go between the retailer and their consumers? How do they deliver that message that there's going to be marketplace sellers on the website?
Go ahead.
Did I stop you guys?
Fortunately, now it's become more commonplace as more people are aware of the marketplace concept, but it certainly can be marketed with quality control and the brand promise, continuing that the brand, the marketplace operator stands behind the goods that are sold on the marketplace and the third-party sellers, and the benefits to the customer. Adrian, anything you want to add?
I agree. I'm not going to add when I always agree with you, Tom, you know.
Yeah, let me see. We have maybe time for one or two more. Any thoughts on to what degree marketplace advertising will impact advertising revenues generated by big box retailer media networks?
I think if they do it well, it's a gold mine of high margin revenue. I mean, think of it. Seattle company built a $20 billion business in 5 years out of that. $20 billion, and there's ways to do it in a much more seller friendly way also. And so once again, it's about getting on it and executing, but once again, if you have 50 sellers, you're not going to create advertising revenues out of that. It's you know, you need the critical mass of sellers. And you know, at Miracle, sometimes, I mean, we have this thing which I think we should add a 0, but we used to say if one of our clients goes live with less than 100 sellers, we don't flag them as live in our internal screens where we track all our customers. I mean, this is also because in the previous era of less maturity around marketplace, we didn't want to, you know, push people too much. But normally that number should be 1,000. And then you start to have the ability to deploy even more services and have amazing coverage of your customers' expectations.
Cool. I think that's all the time that we have. Adrian and Tom, anything you want to add before we close?
Not for me. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to speak with two marketplace leaders like yourselves.
Yeah, I think just going back to the opening statement, I mean, the opening thing is, if we think it's so important for all of you to do a marketplace that if you don't do it, you will end up on a desert island with Tom and Adrian. And Tom's book.
And the book.
Well, thank you so much. I always learn a lot from both of you, so I appreciate your time. And that's all the time we have today. There will be a replay of this chat made available to everyone. After we conclude, you'll see a pop-up window to provide feedback on today's content. If you have time, please take a few moments to fill it out. And thanks, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.